So there's still a debate about whether Oumuamua is a naturally occurring or an artificial object. And I think if you look at some of the analysis, looking at the densities of interstellar objects and the likelihood of an interstellar object naturally entering our solar system, there's really no chance whatsoever that Oumuamua is a naturally occurring object, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of its features, regardless of what it is. There's no chance that it's naturally occurring, like a zero chance. I base that on this paper here, which is called an observational upper limit on the interstellar number density of asteroids and comets. Now, I'm not a mathematician, so I don't know if the math in here is wrong. A mathematician should step forward and make that proof. But I've seen people on all sides of this debate, even Loeb's detractors, cite to this paper. So I'm going to assume it's valid. I've talked about this paper in another video, but I'm just going to briefly. So here they were deriving a 90% confident limit on the interstellar number density of objects. And one of the things they're looking at here is they're considering pan-stars among some other surveys. And essentially what they're trying to do is figure out, like, what's the likelihood that pan-stars is going to see a naturally occurring object? Can we figure that out? And so they go through a very detailed analysis, and there's really interesting charts and graphs and a bunch of stuff. And like I said, I'm not the person, I don't have the skills to be able to speak to the details of the calculations involved here, but they do sort of unpack this at the end. And I think it's really interesting to think of the implications here. So they talk about a previous survey, and they said that a capture rate by Jupiter for an ISO is about once per 60 million years. And then they say this: assuming that the capture rate scales with the ISO spatial density, our confidence limit suggests that the ISO capture rate into heliocentric orbit is less than about once per 400 million years. So, and they're talking about a specific comet in the paper, and they're trying to figure out, is that comet that they saw an interstellar object or not? And they say it's probably not, because once every 400 million years. So from a human, that's a non-event because of the spans of our lifetime. If there's an ET that lives for a million years, then okay, maybe 400 million years is the odds are a little bit better. But we have to scale the odds to our actual lifetimes, right? And so in the scale of things, this is like a non-event. But let's add one more twist to that. Remember that Oumuamua appeared in the local standard rest, right? There's a 1 in 500 chance of an object appearing in the local standard rest, according to Loeb. So think about the odds here for just a second. It's a 1 every 400 million year event. And then within the 1 every 400 million year event, there's only a 1 in 500 chance of it occurring. I mean, there's no way that that's a natural object. There's just literally no way. It's literally impossible. It's irrational and implausible for people to keep arguing that that is a natural object, unless I'm misreading this. And if someone can show me how I'm misreading this, then I will be happy to be corrected, because I don't want to be ignorant. I mean, because it seems to me that that's what this paper is saying. And actually, if you go down here, and I think this bolsters my interpretation of it. Again, I'm not a mathematician, but look, they say if the actual ISO spatial density number lies somewhere in that range, and they're talking about these ranges that they're looking at, they're referring to the Moyo-Martin paper in 2009. They say it will be essentially impossible for the 3 surveys using this analysis to ever detect ISOs, barring a statistical fluke. So in other words, they're saying the fact that you just saw Oumuamua is a statistical fluke in and of itself, right? And then within that 1 in 500 chance. And statistical flukes probably even a little bit generous. I mean, 1 every 400 million years, is that even really a thing? I mean, not to a human, it isn't. It's more of like a random act of God or something like that. And then they go on to say that, the detection of the first non-microscopic ISOs, because they can see microscopic ones is a different thing that they talk about in the paper. They're going to wait for the LSST and some luck. And the LSST is part of the next generation that's coming online in the near future. And then again, they go, and this is, again, I think this bolsters, The conclusion I'm putting forth here, the prospects for identifying a large chunk of material ejected by an extrasolar system passing through our own solar system appear to be bleak. So, I mean, think about it. Once every 400 million years, we should see something like Oumuamua, and then within the 1 in 400 million years, 1 in 500. So that's like that's why I say there's no chance. And then now let's take this analysis and apply it to the only contender out there right now, which is the molecular nitrogen ice theory. There's a theory out there that you can read that people are saying that perhaps this object was a comet and it had frozen molecular nitrogen ice in it. However, remember, first off, the analysis of any natural occurring object already happens within the odds that we've just discussed. Regardless of what its character is, it's already once every 400 million years and 1 in 500. But then the odds get even worse for a nitrogen ice theory. Because in the people that are proposing nitrogen ice theory, they say that only 4% of the objects from the medium of space out there that could come in here could be molecular nitrogen. So within the 400 million years, 1 in 500, and now less than 4% of the objects. That's even worse. That's even worse, just from a straight statistical standpoint. The one thing that's interesting about the molecular nitrogen ice theory is that they predict that 0.1% of objects in the Oort cloud will be molecular nitrogen ice. So that's something that when we get better observational capabilities could actually be looked at and examined. So that'd be interesting. But again, that's why I just think we got to say no chance that Oumuamua is a natural object. And the inference is that it's artificial, whatever it may be. And this is just using like a synthetic argument with reasoning. And that approach is not always persuasive with the general public. But scientists should be, unless I'm reading this wrong, I think scientists should just quit saying that it's naturally occurring unless they can get around the steep odds that they face, unless they have some kind of hole they can poke in this analysis in this paper, because it's just not plausible. And one of the things that you see with ET studies is that scientists, because they have this psychological resistance to admitting that ETs are kind of close to us, they just have a bias against that. So their minds just go into these really, I mean, some of them are very creative and interesting, but they also tend to be implausible a lot of times, right? They do a lot of implausible things sometimes. And even very smart scientists. I mean, we're all like normal people like me are subject to it. And so are PhD scientists. And I think we need to realize that there is no such thing as papal infallibility when it comes to science. I mean, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's great, but he's not always going to be right. Einstein wasn't always right. So no one's always going to be right. And I think on this one, the odds really favor Loeb's theory. And unless there's something wrong with that, I think that we just need to accept that it's artificial. We didn't get a good look at it. We don't know details. Alien light sails, that's a hypothesis as to what particular. But the fact that it's not natural, I think we can, with very, very, very high confidence level, say that Oumuamua was artificial and created by some other civilization that, you know, is out there and maybe we'll run into someday. Who knows?